Welcome back, anime fans. It's time for part 2 of Naruto Falls in Love with Fem Poseidon. We're diving right back into this epic crossover tale, so let's get started. Location: Olympus. In the halls of Olympus, the only sound you could hear were the footsteps of Poseidon, who was on the verge of exploding in pure rage, a rarity in history. The few times this has happened in the past, significant disasters have befallen the human world. The nymphs and servants in the vicinity immediately backed away in fear, sensing the overwhelming presence of deadly intent emanating from Poseidon. This could only mean one thing: someone was about to meet their end. After a few minutes of walking, Poseidon finally reached a massive golden door leading to the council chamber of Olympus. Without further delay, she entered and crossed the threshold to face Ares, Hades, Aphrodite, Hermes, Apollo, Dionysus, Athena, Hera, Hephaestus, Artemis, and Hestia. They were all seated on their respective thrones, except for Hestia, who sat before a flickering fire. As Poseidon entered the room, every eye turned to her, but Zeus, who had a smile on his face, attracted most of her attention. "Finally, you've arrived, Poseidon," Zeus said with a smile, which quickly vanished as he noticed Poseidon's indifference and her standing at the center of the room, gazing at the floor. The gods grew tense because Poseidon's menacing aura now surpassed even that of Kronos, putting them all on high alert. "Why?" Poseidon murmured coldly, causing shivers to run down their spines, especially Zeus, who felt the brunt of her murderous intent. "Why? What do you mean, Poseidon?" Zeus asked, his brow furrowing as a sense of impending doom gripped him. Suddenly, Poseidon raised her gaze to meet Zeus's, and it sent shivers down his spine, as he saw countless ways he could meet his end. "Why did you do it?" she shouted furiously, her power becoming palpable in the room. Zeus remained silent, not by choice but paralyzed by fear. When he didn't respond, Poseidon summoned a water chain that wrapped around his neck. Another fight's about to start, Hestia thought, sighing. She had no intention of interrupting this time. When Poseidon was angry, it was nearly impossible to stop her, and her power surged, surpassing even hers and Zeus's. Whatever Zeus had done to anger Poseidon, it was his problem to resolve. Poseidon gave the chain a tug, causing Zeus to fall from his throne and land in front of her. "I'll ask you again, Zeus. Why did you do it?" Her voice sounded even colder than before, frightening Zeus. The other gods remained silent, not wanting to be the focus of the tyrant of the seas. "This story's getting interesting," Hades commented as he munched on popcorn. He always enjoyed watching Zeus being tormented. Hera, on the other hand, stayed quiet. She wanted to relish her husband's torment for a while. It was rather satisfying for her. "You can't escape this, Zeus. I didn't do anything," Zeus yelled as he struggled to break free from the chains, but it seemed impossible. In response to the thunder god's words, Poseidon's anger only intensified. She not only attempted to kill her beloved but accused him of lying to save his electrified behind. Without a word, Poseidon stomped on the ground, creating a water vortex. When it disappeared, Ares appeared, looking battered. Poseidon had extracted information from him through brute force, something that was satisfying to her. "Ares!" Hera cried out upon seeing her son's condition. Zeus, realizing that Poseidon had learned everything, could only look horrified. "I extracted all the information from Ares, so don't try to lie to me," she told Zeus sternly, moving her trident closer to his throat. "Zeus, what have you done?" Hestia inquired, staring at Zeus, who remained silent. "The sacred sanctuary of water spirits, nymphs, and elementals was attacked by Ares under Zeus's orders." "Nothing remains," Poseidon replied darkly. The other gods were taken aback by this revelation. They were aware of the various sanctuaries of nature spirits, but not their exact locations. However, they knew the consequences of their destruction were dire. The nymphs present there wore horrified expressions as they learned their brothers and sisters had lost their sanctuary. If they didn't act quickly, they would lose them all, and they didn't want that. "Oh no," Athena thought with horror as she realized her mistake. She didn't anticipate that her father would make such a foolish move. "Naruto." Artemis's thoughts desperately echoed in her mind. She needed to go and ensure he was safe. "I hope he's okay," she thought while an image of Naruto passed through her mind. She had formed a friendship with the water elemental, and the idea of something happening to the innocent blonde terrified her. "Why do you care so much? They're just stupid spirits," Zeus shouted, receiving a punch in the face from Poseidon, who was seething with anger. "You know very well that I care about all beings connected to the sea, and he's the one you wanted to attack. Besides, they will die, and it's your fault." Poseidon shouted furiously, looking at Zeus with a murderous glare. She was desperate to save her beloved from the consequences of this problem. Flashback. For the first time in her life, Poseidon was completely scared and desperate. She was currently hugging Naruto, who was sobbing, while several water nymphs and elementals watched from afar as their home and source of life were consumed by flames caused by Ares. "We're going to die," Naruto said, tears streaming from his eyes. His words made Poseidon open her eyes. "Naruto, don't say that," she said seriously, looking at the blonde for making such statements. "He's not wrong," a nymph murmured, catching Poseidon's attention. "What do you mean?" Poseidon asked seriously. "That sanctuary was what granted us immortality and kept us alive. It's where the ocean created most of us, and to ensure we lived eternally, it created the tree that sustained us. Without it, it's only a matter of time before we perish," the nymph finished, tears of frustration welling up in her eyes. Poseidon's eyes widened, and she looked at Naruto. She would do anything to save him, even if it meant going to the underworld and giving her soul to her brother, but before that, she would have to deal with Zeus and half of Olympus if necessary. End of flashback. In that memory, Poseidon tightened her grip on her trident, bringing it closer to Zeus's neck as he struggled desperately to break free. "They're just mortals. Disposable beings. They don't matter," Zeus yelled, attempting to reason with his sister, who was only growing angrier. Unconcerned, Poseidon raised her trident with the intention of driving it into Zeus. The other gods were about to intervene. "Poseidon." Ray's voice resonated in the room just centimeters before Poseidon's trident would embed itself in Zeus's head. The goddess of the seas diverted the weapon upon hearing her mother's voice, causing it to only graze Zeus's cheek, nearly rendering him unconscious. "Mother," Poseidon said, looking at her mother with a serious expression. "Daughter, I know you want to do it, but I cannot let you kill Zeus," Rhea said, gazing at her daughter, who was far from pleased with this decision. "Please listen to her," Zeus said, then received a kick to the stomach from Poseidon. "Shut up," Poseidon yelled, while Zeus could only express pain from the blow. "Mother." She couldn't finish her sentence, as her mother interrupted her. "I know what Zeus did, and I can assure you both he and Ares will face judgment, which will be overseen by Hades," she replied, then looked at her eldest son, who smiled. "At your service," he said as they disappeared in a fiery tornado. "Wait!" Zeus cried desperately as he and Ares were covered by the fiery tornado, which would take them to the underworld for their punishment. Hera remained silent. Like the others, she was furious with Zeus and Ares for their actions, but she needed to maintain her composure. She would personally punish Zeus and Ares later. For now, she had to wait for Hades to finish their punishment. Poseidon looked back at her mother, who let out a sigh. "Mora, we don't have time, we need to fix this. Do you understand?" Poseidon took several deep breaths and nodded. "Very well, Hestia, I need your help, only you can calm people down very quickly," Rhea said to Hestia, who nodded. "Hermes, I need you to fetch some things," she requested, showing her grandson a list, to which Hermes nodded and said, "At your service." Atenea, Apollo, Poseidon, come with me, the three gods looked at each other and nodded. "The rest of you, go," they didn't need to hear more and disappeared. "Grandmother, what will we do?" Atenea asked, her only desire being to save the blonde from a death caused by her mistake. "We will find a way to save them, but first, we have to bring Naruto," Rhea said, causing Atenea and Poseidon's eyes to widen, and Apollo looked confused as he didn't know who Naruto was. "Why?" Poseidon asked, her voice tinged with nervousness. "Naruto is the key to everything. Trust me, everything will be fine," Rhea reassured calmly, placing her hands on Poseidon's shoulders, who gradually relaxed. "One question. Who is Naruto?" Apollo asked in confusion. Poseidon was about to answer, but Rhea spoke first. "Poseidon's lover," she said, while Atenea gritted her teeth at the revelation. "Off." At that moment, the three turned to Apollo, who had fainted upon hearing the news. They sighed at his reaction. Things were getting more complicated. Location: the underworld, Hades' punishment chamber. "You know, Zeus, I always knew you'd do something very foolish, and you've done it. But this goes beyond limits," Hades said sternly while looking at his chained brother lying on a table. Zeus had a fearful look, and for good reason. Everyone knew the brutal punishments that Hades was known to deliver, and he was in charge of punishing most of the Titans. "Shut your mouth, Hades, and set me free. It's an order from your king," Zeus shouted, trying to break free. Hades just shook his head, a sinister smile creeping across his face, sending shivers down the thunder god's spine. "Oh no, Zeus. This was an order from Mother, so there's no escape from this," Hades replied, causing fear in Zeus. Without saying another word, Hades approached Zeus and placed his hand on his chest. At that moment, the god of thunder began screaming in pain as he felt his chest burning. While this was happening, in another chamber, Ares was being tortured. His member was being severed, then reattached only to be torn off again, but this was just the beginning of his punishment. Location: Olympus. "What do we do now, Mom?" Poseidon asked her mother, who was joined by Athena and Apollo, who had just awakened from a momentary faint. "As I've said, we're going for Naruto. He is the key to keeping everyone alive," Rhea replied, looking at Poseidon. Rhea could see the concern in Poseidon, though the goddess was hiding it well. "By the way, what's so special about my Aunt Poseidon's lover?" Apollo asked with some difficulty using the word lover. He never thought anyone could tame the beast. Unbeknownst to them, Athena was feigning indifference, but she was a little jealous. Was she in denial? She was very jealous. In response to her grandson's question, Rhea let out a small sigh before turning to the three gods. "It has more to do with Naruto's father." Rei's words caught the gods' attention, especially Poseidon. She genuinely didn't know anything about her father-in-law and didn't want to ask Naruto, as it was an extremely sensitive topic for him. "With his father?" Athena asked, receiving a nod from her grandmother, who fell silent for a few seconds and then put on a serious expression. "Listen carefully, what I'm about to tell you must not leave this room. Promise on the river Styx that you won't tell anyone." Rei's voice was deadly serious. The gods exchanged glances and nodded in agreement. "We promise on the river Styx that the words spoken in this room will not be shared with anyone else," they all swore simultaneously as lightning rumbled in the background, signifying the unbreakable nature of the oath. "Very well. Look, when Oceanus created the nymphs, elementals, and other nature-related spirits, he created beings known as the pillars. Each of them is the first of their kind, the first nymph, the first elemental, and so on. When the first pillar was born, Oceanus used their essence to create something that would keep them and their descendants alive for all eternity," Rhea explained. "One moment, are you saying Naruto is?" Athena was interrupted by her grandmother. "Naruto is the son of the elemental pillar. He not only inherited his father's power but also a part of his essence. If we can replicate the formula Oceanus used to create him, we can probably save all the water spirits," Rhea replied, noting the surprised expressions on Apollo and Athena's faces. Poseidon was looking down, her face maintaining a serious expression. Inside, she was resolute, willing to do anything to prevent her lover's death, even if it meant venturing into the underworld to retrieve his soul. Before anyone could say anything, Hermes entered with a basket in his hands. The god appeared exhausted, and for good reason, as he had been racing across the planet, searching for everything his grandmother had requested, even crossing into other territories. It was quite a challenge. Hermes appeared as a 20-year-old man with pale skin and long silver hair. He wore a blue shirt with armor pieces on the sleeves and sides of his abdomen, along with a blue top hat with wings on the sides. He wore a sky-blue gemstone necklace and his trusty winged sandals on his feet. Hermes is the god of trade, heraldry, merchants, roads, trickery, sports, travelers, and athletes in ancient Greek religion and mythology. He was the son of Zeus and the Pleiad Maya, and the second youngest of the Olympian gods. Dionysus was the youngest. Hermes was the messenger and herald of the gods, known as the divine trickster and also the divine deceiver and the god of boundaries and boundary crossing, the patron of shepherds, thieves, graves, and heralds. "I'm exhausted. Ran a lot," Hermes replied with labored breath, passing the basket to Rhea, who took it with a small smile. "I'm amazed you managed to get everything, Hermes," Rhea said. "Me too. Darn near got devoured in Shinto territory." Hermes shuddered at the memory of almost being swallowed by Yamada no Orochi, the eight-headed serpent. "I see. In that case, you can go rest," Rhea said, and Hermes turned to leave. "Nigerunde-o," Hermes shouted before running off, causing those present to break into a nervous sweat. "What's in that basket, Grandma?" Athena asked with a curious look. "In this basket, there are items that will help us fix this mess caused by Zeus," she murmured with a smile before turning to Poseidon. "It's time to go get him," Rhea said, and the three gods nodded in agreement. Rhea teleported them to where Naruto was. "Hang on, Naruto, I'm on my way," the sea goddess thought determinedly. "Please, Hades, I beg you, set me free." Zeus cried out in supplication as he watched his elder brother, who had a wicked smile on his face. In this moment, Zeus was enduring the worst punishment of all. Having an itchy nose and being unable to scratch it. "You know that won't happen, Zeus," Hades replied in a sinister tone. Zeus was currently chained to a chair, with small feathers occasionally brushing against his nose, causing an unbearable itch. However, he couldn't scratch it because all his limbs were bound to the chair with chains. "No!" Zeus screamed in agony while his nose turned red. Daniel was right, this punishment is very effective, Hades muttered to himself. He had recently been using this method of punishment, advised by his friend, and it was undeniably effective. People went crazy within an hour, which delighted him. Meanwhile, in another chamber, Ares was submerged in a pit and covered with ice cubes. This would normally not affect him, but the chains he wore deactivated his divine nature, making this punishment excruciating for a god like him. Ares' skin had turned a shade of blue, and he trembled continuously due to the cold and pain coursing through his body. "What's going on here?" Apollo asked, looking confused. When he arrived at the location where his aunt's lover was supposed to be, he saw a group of nymphs and elementals who appeared highly distressed, running around frantically. "Something is happening," Rhea murmured as she surveyed her surroundings. "And it must be something bad," Athena added, observing the nervous and desperate state of the nymphs and elementals. Undoubtedly, something terrible was unfolding. Poseidia's mind was racing. For some reason, her heart had started beating rapidly, and her thoughts were consumed by her lover and the notion that something was happening to him. At that moment, a nymph approached Poseidia, her face filled with desperation. "Lady Poseidia, I'm glad you've arrived," the nymph exclaimed, catching the goddess's attention. "What's going on?" Poseidia asked, remaining calm but demanding. "There's no time to explain. You have to come with me quickly," the nymph replied urgently, confusing the gods and Rhea. "Get a hold of yourself and tell me what's happening," Poseidia ordered, slightly irritated by the nymph's behavior. "Something is wrong with brother Naruto." He started screaming in pain out of nowhere, and strange black marks appeared on part of his abdomen. The nymph cried out, clearly concerned about her older brother and friend. Upon hearing this, Poseidia wasted no time and sprinted in the direction where she sensed Naruto's power signature, followed closely by Apollo and Rhea, but especially by Athena, whose level of concern matched Poseidia's. I'm sorry, Athena repeated in her mind, shedding small tears as they raced toward the source of the distress. After running for a few seconds, they reached an area where several water nymphs and elementals were gathered. They all wore expressions of deep concern. "Naruto!" Poseidia cried out when she noticed the blonde on the ground, being attended to by some nymphs who immediately stepped aside upon seeing her. "What's happening?" Apollo asked as he looked at his mother. "Naruto was the one most connected to the sanctuary, so he's the first and the one most affected by its destruction," Rhea explained. As she spoke, Naruto let out a painful scream, and the black marks on his abdomen expanded slightly. "Naruto, hang on, we're going to help you," Athena said, her concern evident in her eyes as she addressed the blonde. Poseidia watched this with suspicion. Since when did they know each other? She was beginning to suspect something. "It hurts," Naruto exclaimed in agony, clutching his abdomen. "We have to get him to Olympus quickly," Apollo shouted, receiving nods from Rhea and Athena. Poseidia ignored them as she held Naruto tightly. "Get ready," Rhea warned. A small circle formed beneath them, which would teleport them to Olympus. Time skip. Location, Olympus. "We need to lay him down on the ground," Rhea ordered. Poseidia carefully placed Naruto on the ground, cradling his head in her lap to ensure his comfort. "All right, take these," Rhea said, taking the basket Hermes had given her and pulling out 3 orbs, which she handed to Athena, Apollo, and Poseidia. "What do we do with these?" Athena asked. "Stop asking questions and listen. Channel your power into these orbs, and the rest will happen on its own. Poseidia, when you're there, find a giant tower atop a mountain," Rhea instructed. Poseidia was bewildered by this. "Where?" she asked. There's no time to explain, and the gods reluctantly refrained from further questioning. They channeled their power into the orbs, which then lit up, forming a triangle around Naruto, who began breathing more peacefully. Athena clenched her fists, a tear escaping her eye. She didn't want this to happen. "Poseidia, be careful." Before the sea goddess could inquire further, everything turned black for her. "Minato, please help me just this once," she pleaded, hoping her daughter could fulfill this mission. "Please free me from Hades, I am your king, and you must obey me." If you release me now, your punishment will be milder, Zeus shouted angrily at his brother. Currently, his condition was completely messed up, he had cuts all over his body, was missing an eye, and various parts of his body were bruised from the poisons injected by Hades. In response to Zeus's words, Hades smiled sinisterly and somewhat amused, saying, "King? Look around, this is not Olympus, this is the underworld. Here, I am the ruler, and my word is law. You have no power here. I think your ego has inflated so much that you forget how domains work. Besides, I am the most powerful god, and when I obey you, it's only because I want to and can. Right now, I choose not to obey you, so you better be quiet or I'll send you to my father for his amusement." Suddenly, a cry of pain escaped Zeus's mouth as he felt his genitals being cut for the 10th time that day. Hades only smiled with satisfaction at Zeus's screams. He didn't know how long he had been torturing him, but he didn't complain. He loved his job, especially when it came to his brother. "Hey, where am I?" mumbled Poseidon as she looked around in confusion. She realized she wasn't in Olympus, instead, she was in a peculiar forest with a strong spiritual presence. Looking up, she saw numerous souls heading towards what seemed like a tremor in the distance. "Am I in the underworld?" she wondered. "You're not in the underworld," a voice replied, and Poseidon turned to see Thanatos, the god of death, looking at her seriously. Thanatos was a tall, muscular man with pale gray skin, long black hair, and completely white eyes. His hands were large with claw-like fingers. He wore a tattered black robe and a golden bracelet on his left bicep, usually carrying his sword with him. "Thanatos, what are you doing here?" she asked, preparing for a potential confrontation with the god. Thanatos only tilted his head slightly while looking at the goddess. "This is the spiritual world," he answered, confusing Poseidon. "Spiritual world?" she asked. "This is the place where chosen souls come to await their turn to be reincarnated. Unlike the underworld, if your actions are neither entirely good nor entirely bad, you end up here," he explained quickly and simply. "Why didn't I know about this place?" Thanatos snorted at her question. "Because I'm sure most of the council members would use this place for their nonsense. Few gods know about this place, and I'd like to keep it that way," he said, crossing his arms. Poseidon agreed with Thanatos. She was certain Zeus would do something foolish or that Hades might try to merge this place with the underworld to maintain control. She stayed silent for a few seconds before letting out a sigh. "Thanatos, I'm here too." She couldn't finish her sentence as she was interrupted by the god of death. "I already know why you're here," he replied. "How?" Poseidon asked, confused about how Thanatos knew the reason for her presence. "Rhea told me. You need to save that elemental and the other water spirits," he said, receiving a small nod from Poseidon. "Luckily, I know the solution to your problem," he added, surprising Poseidon. How could he know that? "How?" she asked. Thanatos smiled at her question. He had studied and acquired a lot of knowledge over the years, including how the various sanctuaries that kept nature spirits alive were created and how to create them. Although he couldn't do it due to his lack of power, he knew the necessary steps to create one. "All you have to do is find the seed of life," Thanatos told her. "What's the seed of life?" Poseidon was growing more and more confused about what Thanatos was talking about. "The seed of life is what Ocean used to create the sanctuary. This seed holds 1/3 of his power and, when combined with the essence of the pillar, can restore the sanctuary to its normal state," Thanatos explained. He wasn't going to reveal how to create one himself, though. Where's the fun in that? "And where can I find this seed of life?" Thanatos simply pointed in a direction, and Poseidon followed his gaze, seeing it directed towards a tower where a multitude of souls were heading. "The seed is well guarded. You'll have to go there and retrieve it, but it won't be easy. It's protected by a guardian who will do whatever it takes to keep it safe, along with the souls in that place," Thanatos explained seriously. Poseidon contemplated Thanatos' words. She would need to go there and get that seed, likely requiring a fight, which should be easy and a victory. "Can you take me there?" she asked Thanatos, who shook his head. "Being here reduces my power almost entirely. My only duty here is to bring the souls to wait for their reincarnation, and then I leave." "The same goes for you," he replied, surprising Poseidon, who realized Thanatos was right. No matter how hard she tried, she couldn't feel her power. This was a significant problem. It's a protective mechanism of this place. To stay safe, it drains most, if not all, of a being's power to prevent them from causing trouble here. I'm a small exception to that rule because my job is to bring souls here, Thanatos explained, turning to leave. "Where are you going?" Poseidon asked. I'm heading back, my time here is done. By the way, be cautious. As I said, this is the spiritual world, and there are certain aggressive souls roaming around here. One more thing, Thanatos added, turning to look at Poseidon. For some reason, this place tends to induce hallucinations and glimpses of a not-so-distant future or even random people's memories. That was the last thing Thanatos said before he vanished in a small black flash of light. Poseidon stood there, gazing at the spot where Thanatos had disappeared, then sighed with exhaustion before adopting a serious but determined expression. She was going to save her lover, even if it meant doing the impossible. The only issue was that she couldn't use all her power, but she'd deal with that later. There were more important matters to attend to now. What happened? Apollo asked. A while ago, the whole room had lit up brightly, then returned to normal. What's wrong with Seaweed Brain? Athena asked, looking at Poseidon, who was on her knees and seemed to be staring into nothingness. What was curious was the strange and somewhat terrified white gleam in her eyes. I sent her to the other side, Rhea said simply, letting out a sigh. Fortunately, this went well and not like the last time. The other side? The two gods said simultaneously, their confusion and curiosity increasing. Grandmother, what's the other side? Athena asked, looking at her grandmother. Unfortunately, you can't know that, Rhea replied seriously, causing both Apollo and Athena to furrow their brows. Athena, being the goddess of wisdom, didn't like not knowing something. Why not? Athena asked, with a slight frown in response to her grandmother's answer. Because only certain beings are allowed to know about that place, and I can't tell you either to keep it away from Olympus and other beings, she said with a stern expression as she looked at her two grandchildren. Apollo shrugged at that. If his grandmother said so, there must be a reason. He didn't want to get into trouble with her. On the other hand, Athena's frown deepened. She had to figure out what that place her grandmother wanted to hide was, and she would do it, no matter how hard it was. Sensing the tension building in the room, Apollo decided to speak up to change the atmosphere. So, how long will she be like this? Apollo asked, looking at his aunt, who had an eerie white gleam in her eyes. Rhea let out a small sigh. Until she finds what will help save both Naruto and the other water spirits, she replied, looking at Naruto with a sad expression. Naruto was the spitting image of his father, and that brought a sharp pain to Rei's heart as she remembered Naruto's father. She had promised herself to protect Naruto, but she had failed. You knew him from before? Athena asked, her eyes narrowing as she noticed her grandmother's expression. His father. Minato, Naruto's father, and I. We had history. But because of my mistake, all of that was lost, she replied with an excessive sadness in her voice. Every day of her life, she had cursed herself for what she had done. If she had trusted him as he had told her, she was sure he would still be alive. Athena couldn't help but feel bad as she noticed her grandmother's expression deepening further. I'm sorry if I asked something too sensitive, she apologized with a slightly embarrassed look. Rhea simply shook her head and let out a sigh. That's in the past, but it still hurts to remember, she replied, then looked at Naruto, extending her hand to caress his hair. From now on, she would do what she should have done many years ago. How much time does Poseidon have to find what's supposed to help us save them? Apollo asked, looking at his aunt and then at Naruto. She'll have 24 hours, after that, it'll be too late. Luckily, time in that place is very different, Rhea answered. After that, no one asked any more questions and remained in silence. How long have I been walking? Poseidon murmured as she walked through the endless forest that seemed to never end. For some reason, with every step she took, she felt a strange pressure in the air followed by a chilly atmosphere. Suddenly, she stopped as she reached what looked like a clearing in the forest, letting out a sigh. She still had a long way to go to reach that tower. Huh? She asked when she saw what seemed to be a person peering from behind one of the trees, prompting her to go on guard. Who's there? She asked with seriousness. Suddenly, the person fully revealed itself, and Poseidon was somewhat surprised by its appearance. The being was semi-transparent, with a figure resembling a long, black tube. It had a sinister and expressionless mask with purple reflections painted on its head, and there was also a mouth painted on the mask. What is that? Poseidon wondered as she looked at one of the spirits that inhabited this place. She had to admit that the creature didn't seem very threatening, so she slowly approached it. I've never seen a being like this, she said, extending her hand to touch its mask. However, she had to jump back as a mouth seemed to form from the stomach of the spirit and tried to bite her. Never seen a being like this, she extended her hand to touch its mask but had to jump back as a mouth seemed to form from the stomach of the spirit and tried to bite her. Damn! She muttered as she observed this, getting into a defensive position, ready to defend herself. Before the creature could move, a loud roar echoed throughout the area, seeming to scare the spirit away. Poseidon blinked several times at this, then sighed. "I have a feeling that won't be the last time I see that thing," she murmured as she slowly walked away from the clearing, not wanting to know what scared off the spirit. Unbeknownst to her, a figure with a fox mask watched Poseidon from the shadows of a tree. He stood there for a few more seconds before vanishing with the wind. The goddess had piqued his curiosity. "When every parent created me and my brothers and sisters, they wanted us to be the beginning of something great. They wanted us to be the vessel of the life they created in their power. They wanted us to take care of their descendants without forgetting to create our own. For us, life can become monotonous and boring after thousands of years, but there are times when that's not the case, like what's happening to me. Our job is to protect the sanctuary that keeps all our brothers and sisters alive, and that's what we plan to do until the end of our days," said a blond man with a big smile on his face. "Minato, can I know why you're telling me this?" Ria asked with a playful smile as she looked at Minato, who started to laugh nervously. "I think I got carried away," Minato replied as he approached Ria to sit beside her with a smile. "It's been a while since the last time I visited. How have you been?" Ria asked with a beautiful smile that could enchant anyone. "Not much, really. I've been taking care of the sanctuary as usual, and I was looking after Helena. She's about to give birth to our child," he replied with a smile, not noticing the furrowed brow on Ray's face as she looked down. How is she?" she asked with a slightly muted tone. "Sometimes. She wished she were in Helena's place. She's doing well, in fact, she often asks when you'll come to see her when the baby is born," he commented with a small smile. Ria only clenched her white dress a bit. She wouldn't admit that she felt jealous of Helena, and it broke her heart that Helena was the one carrying the blonde man's child. Trying to put those thoughts aside, she looked at Minato with a somewhat forced smile and said, "Of course, I will. I've been busy lately, but I'll visit her when the baby is born." Minato smiled at her warmly, saying, "Thank you, Ria. I love you." "And I love you," Ria thought with sadness as she looked at Minato. She had loved him for many years but had never told him. She had acted as if she didn't care, something she regretted. She had cried when she learned about his relationship with that woman, and she cried even more when she found out that the woman who stole her blonde man was pregnant with his child. Without a doubt, Minato was the only mortal who had won her love. "I think we're almost there," Poseidon said as she continued to walk through this vast forest. She was on high alert the whole time because this place had nullified her powers. Fortunately, she knew how to defend herself perfectly without needing her powers, which kept her from being completely defenseless. The only downside was that this place was entirely unpredictable, and she didn't know what kind of beings she might encounter. "I hope to finish Ko." She stopped suddenly, only to see an arrow pass very close to her and embed itself in a nearby tree trunk. She quickly went on guard, seeing movement in the trees around her. Suddenly, several figures emerged from the trees, and she stared at these beings. "Who are these?" Poseidon wondered as she looked at the figures in front of her. They had masks on their faces, and their bodies were covered by black robes. Several of them had weapons like swords or knives, and a few had bows. They remained still and silent as they looked at her. "Friend or foe?" Poseidon asked seriously as she looked at the spirits. In response, they raised their masks slightly, revealing spiral-shaped mouths with many rows of sharp teeth. "I suppose it's an enemy," Poseidon said, and the spirits lunged at her in an attempt to consume her. Poseidon quickly jumped to the side, evading an attack from the spirits. She was unarmed and outnumbered, which put her at a disadvantage. She had to fight barehanded and find a way to escape this situation. She growled when she felt an arrow graze her right arm, which infuriated her. Seeing one of the spirits approaching her, she grabbed its head and, with immense strength, crushed the spirit's head against the ground. She then lifted it and slammed it against the ground until the spirit disappeared in a puff of smoke. She couldn't take satisfaction from her victory, as she swiftly turned to grab the sword of one of the remaining spirits, which tried to attack her from behind. Poseidon struggled with the spirit, which also tried to bite her. What are such repugnant beings doing in a world like this? She spat before giving the spirit a strong kick to push it away, all while holding the sword. They taint this world with their unpleasant presence, she continued, then delivered a fatal blow to the spirit, cutting off its head, causing it to vanish in a cloud of smoke. "Daniel, I clarify that they don't die, they simply reform elsewhere like the monsters in Percy Jackson." Looking at what she had done, Poseidon stared at the sword in her hands and had to admit that it was very beautiful. The sword was made of black and blue metal on the lower part, with several details on the upper edge of the hilt, which seemed to have a carved face. What is such a repugnant being doing with a sword like this? Poseidon wondered before making a swift slash that cut an arrow heading her way. Apparently, the coordination of these spirits was terrible, as each attacked however they pleased. I don't think these guys are very smart, she said before thrusting the sword into one of the archers and quickly withdrawing it to block another spirit's sword. They struggled for a few seconds before Poseidon headbutted it, causing it to step back. She then swiftly thrust her sword into the spirit's neck, making it disappear in a puff of smoke. She let out a sigh and turned to look at the last remaining spirit, which didn't take its eyes off her. Look, if you can understand what I'm saying, you have one chance to leave here peacefully. If not, you'll meet the same fate as your friends, Poseidon told the spirit seriously while looking at it. The spirit seemed to release a small laugh before disappearing into black mist. Poseidon just snorted at that. This place was becoming more problematic by the minute. Time skip. After that troublesome encounter with those spirits, Poseidon continued her journey relatively peacefully until a strange mist began to appear, putting her on high alert. This mist. She muttered, starting to walk cautiously. Without a doubt, this mist was far from normal. Well, nothing in this place was normal. Daddy. The cry of what seemed to be a child puzzled her until she saw the mist around her start to swirl in front of her, forming the figure of a child she instantly recognized. Naruto. She murmured, truly surprised and confused about how this was possible. She was about to approach him, but she hesitated, remembering the words Thanatos had said about what this place could do. For some reason, this place tends to make someone have hallucinations and the occasional vision of a not-so-distant future or even the memories of a random spirit. This has to be a memory. But whose? She wondered, as she continued to watch this memory unfold. Currently, Naruto was in the middle of a forest that was ablaze, caused by several cyclopes. Some of them, tired of the god's rule, had rebelled and caused death and destruction in the process. Poseidon watched the childlike figure of Naruto with concern. If this were real, she would undoubtedly go and rescue him quickly. She blinked a couple of times, realizing the moment it was. This was when those cyclopes had betrayed them and started causing chaos in the human world. Fortunately, they had managed to stop them and send their souls to the underworld, where they were tortured without respite until the end of time. Naru! Yelled a young man who appeared to be in his early 20s. The man was Minato, a water elemental and Naruto's father. Poseidon couldn't help but look at Minato's figure with curiosity and surprise. He must be her lover's father and also the first water elemental. Now that she thought about it, Naruto was an identical copy of his father. No one would doubt that they were direct family. Naruto! Where are you? Minato cried desperately as he strained to see through the smoke and fire in the forest. Daddy! Naruto yelled desperately upon hearing his father. Before he could say anything else, a cyclops loomed behind Naruto, causing him to turn and look in fear. Wow, what do we have here? A cyclops said as he looked at Naruto with hunger and predatory intent, making Naruto tremble in fear. How dare he touch him, Poseidon thought, her expression devoid of all emotion as she looked at the cyclops. The presence of that being seemed utterly repugnant. An elemental. Just in time for dinner, the cyclops said as he grabbed Naruto by the neck, ready to devour him. Let me go. Please. I haven't done anything wrong. I've been a good kid. Pleaded Naruto, tears streaming down his face from fear. Poseidon's anger was growing, and she wanted even more to cut off the cyclops' hands. She knew this had happened before, but she couldn't help but feel great anger. Stop crying, you cursed brat. The cyclops yelled, irritated by the child's whining. Without waiting, the cyclops moved Naruto closer to his mouth to devour him. Naruto simply closed his eyes, awaiting his imminent death at the hands of the cyclops. But just millimeters before the cyclops could devour the boy, the sound of flesh being cut filled the area. Poseidon sighed with satisfaction. She would have done the same but more slowly to make it even more painful. Ah! You bastard son of a! The cyclops exclaimed in pain as the hand holding the child was severed from his body. With great pain, the cyclops brought his other hand to the wound to try to stop the bleeding. Who was the despicable? The cyclops tried to say but couldn't finish because his head was severed from his body, killing him instantly. The place fell into silence for a moment until a voice spoke. Naru-chan. Open your eyes. She could only see Minato's figure with gratitude for saving her beloved. Naru-chan, she thought with some amusement at the nickname Minato used for Naruto. Upon hearing the voice telling him to open his eyes, Naruto did nothing but obey. Slowly and somewhat fearfully, he opened his eyes to see his father, making his expression turn very happy. Minato just smiled and then, with a pained groan, placed a hand on his abdomen where a visible wound was. When he came here, a large group of Cyclops ambushed him to try and kill him, but that wouldn't stop him from saving his son. After all, he was willing to die just to keep his little blonde safe, and he made a promise to dismember anyone who dared to harm his son. He's a good man, Poseidon said, then looked at Minato's wound. Seeing his father's wound, Naruto's expression changed from happiness to concern. "Dad!" Naruto shouted as he approached his father's wound, attempting to heal it because his father had taught him some healing magic. "I think I'll ask him to teach me that," she said to herself. Learning to use that magic would be really useful. Seeing what his son wanted to do, Minato stopped him, causing a look of anger/concern/confusion in Naruto. "There's no time, Naruto, you have to get out of here," Minato said as he started coughing up some blood. Those Cyclops hurt him more than he thought. "We have to get out of here," Naruto told him, as he wouldn't leave without his father. "Naruto, I won't get far with this wound. Besides, you're more important than me," Minato said calmly, to which Naruto just looked angry. "Don't say foolish things. We have to go," a frustrated Naruto shouted, with small tears in his eyes. He didn't want to leave his father. Poseidon watched this with a bit of sadness. Maybe she could ask Hades to bring back her lover's father. After all, the god of the underworld owed her a favor. Minato managed to straighten up and match his son's height. He knew well that Naruto would leave on his own accord, as stubborn as his mother. "Naruto, I want you to promise me something," Minato asked with a caring tone. "What is it?" Naruto inquired, confused yet curious. "When you grow up and have a family, take care of them and give them the same love your mother and I gave you," Minato requested with a hint of sadness, gazing at his son with the affection only a father could give. For some reason, tears welled up in Naruto's eyes. I promise," Naruto replied with teary eyes, and Minato wiped away his tears. And he truly kept that promise. Naruto was undeniably a great man, one that any woman would want as a partner. Unfortunately for them, Naruto was taken, and he wouldn't let go easily. "And Naruto, remember. Daddy will always be with you." Naruto disappeared in a flash, crying. The last thing he saw was a group of Cyclops appearing just as his father teleported him. At that moment, the mist dissipated, leaving Poseidon standing in the same spot, her expression showing confusion about what had just transpired. This was unexpected. "So, you saw it all." Hearing the voice behind her, she turned to find a blonde man smiling at her. The goddess of the sea stood there, her face reflecting sadness. She tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come. "So, you're my son's partner," Minato said with a smile at the person who had won his son's love. Poseidon took a moment to compose herself and regain her composure. "How is this possible?" Poseidon asked, a serious expression on her face. "It's complicated," he replied with a shrug. "You're supposed to be in that huge tower over there," Poseidon exclaimed, pointing at the mountain. "I came here to take the seed of life because they're dying," Minato said sadly. At that moment, a silence fell, broken by Minato's words. "Look, we don't have much time," Minato exclaimed, confusing Poseidon. "What do you mean?" she asked. "No time for explanations. I want you to promise me something," he requested, and Poseidon nodded. "Save them all," he said, his words carrying a deeper meaning, which Poseidon understood. Suddenly, Poseidon's body began to glow, and something started forming in her hands. "What's happening?" She looked at her hands as an object took shape. Something was wrong, she was supposed to go to that tower. Something was amiss, this couldn't be easy. There had to be more to this. Before she could ask, she vanished from the spot, leaving only Minato, who started to fade away. "Naru-chan," were his final words before vanishing completely. In the distance, a cloaked figure had observed everything. They were only there to ensure everything went as planned. "Phase 1 is complete," the figure said before turning and walking away. "The Guardian was tough, but not tough enough. Breaking a few rules is nothing compared to protecting one's descendants. The gods are foolish," they said in anger before disappearing, a hint of sadness in their expression, but they knew what they had done would not be in vain. Well, the day has arrived. We knew that sooner or later, the end would come, and here we are. Look, I want to express myself better at the end of this chapter, so for now, I won't say anything more. Let's begin with the chapter. Sadness. That's all Poseidon felt at this moment, nothing but sadness. She was currently by Naruto's side, lying in his mother's room. Looking at her beloved. No, her love. She proceeded to gently stroke Naruto's hair, which was softer than anything she had ever touched. Her hand moved down to his cheek marks, and she caressed them slowly. Naruto, she softly spoke the name of the person she had fallen in love with many years ago and would love until the end of her days. How is he? Ria asked as she entered the room. He's been asleep for over 3 days, Poseidon replied, continuing to gently stroke Naruto's cheeks. Ria let out a sigh as she looked at her daughter. For the first time, she saw Poseidon in this state of sadness, anger, and a bit of desperation. She knew it was because of Naruto's condition. From what Poseidon had told her, Naruto was always there to comfort her in moments like these, and not having him was causing her a great deal of stress. You really love him, Ria said, looking at her daughter, who nodded without hesitation. More than anything. At first, love seemed very insignificant and useless to me. But overnight, it stopped being insignificant and useless, she replied calmly, with a small smile on her face. Ria remained silent as she looked at Naruto. Love was something so powerful that it could start wars and end them, and it could either drive a person to madness or lead them to absolute happiness. Unfortunately, it hadn't touched her. Mother, her daughter's voice interrupted Rei's thoughts, and she turned to look at her with curiosity. Yes? Ria asked in a gentle tone. How did you know about Naruto and his father? Poseidon asked with great curiosity. Ria froze for a moment. That was a question she was afraid to answer, but she knew it was the right thing to do. Ria let out a heavy sigh and sat down beside her daughter. Many years ago, I met Naruto's father, Ria replied, surprising her daughter, but she remained silent, eager to hear more. He was an incredible person, calm, friendly, and very affectionate towards many people. At first, I considered him a great friend, but then... You fell in love with him, Poseidon interjected, and her mother slowly nodded. I didn't know what to do. It had been a long time since someone made me feel those feelings. Normally, one would confess their feelings, but... I decided to keep it to myself, and he ended up falling in love with someone else. Rei's voice was filled with complete sadness and regret. She continuously wondered what would have happened if she had told Minato that she loved him. She wished she could answer that question, but it seemed fate did not want her to love someone romantically again. Poseidon remained silent in response to her mother's words. She couldn't deny that she was genuinely surprised by this revelation, but she didn't show it. Besides being surprised, she also felt sad for her mother, as she had to witness the person she loved building a life and family with someone else. At that time, I wanted to scream and cry, but I knew I had to stay strong through it all, she said, then looked at Naruto. She had to admit he was a spitting image of Minato. I spent many years searching for him to fulfill the promise I made to Minato. When I saw him in that state, I couldn't help but feel that I had failed Mina. But fortunately, we were able to save him, along with the elementals and the water nymphs. Ria finished speaking, releasing a sigh of relief. This had undoubtedly been very stressful. Poseidon didn't reply and, as usual, remained silent. Lowering her gaze, she noticed that Naruto was slowly starting to open his eyes, which excited her a bit, seeing that her partner was about to wake up. Poseidon, Naruto said as he opened his eyes and looked at the goddess, who gazed at him with all the love she had. Naruto, you're okay now. It's all over, she calmly replied. What happened? The last thing I remember is Lord Ares attacking him. Upon remembering that, he tried to sit up quickly in bed, but he let out a painful groan. His chest hurt too much. Naruto. Relax, you shouldn't exert yourself, Poseidon exclaimed, sounding concerned. But the sanctuary, it was destroyed. Naruto, they are safe. We've already resolved that issue, you don't have to worry, Poseidon interrupted calmly while stroking Naruto's hair as he simply settled back into the bed. The words of his partner brought great relief to Naruto, who let out a sigh of relief while enjoying the warm touch of Poseidon's hand. Ria just stayed on the sidelines but couldn't help but smile. She had never thought she would see her daughter act so loving and caring. Naruto had undoubtedly changed Poseidon's demeanor, even if she didn't want to admit it. Grandma. Both of them turned towards the door to see Hermes, who was panting heavily and had several wounds on his body, which made both of them quite serious. Naruto tried to see what was happening, but Poseidon blocked his view, and his body hurt too much to move. Hermes. Ria said, concerned for her grandson. We have a problem, Hermes said, wincing from the pain caused by the attack he had received. What's going on? Posdia asked, looking serious. She didn't know why, but she had a slight foreboding of what had happened, and she didn't like it at all. Before Hermes could answer, a loud rumble echoed through Olympus, and several lightning bolts began to flash in the sky. That answers your question, Hermes replied, looking at his aunt and grandmother. You son of a bee, you're still alive, Posdia thought to herself, clenching her fist. How did he escape from the underworld? Ria asked, but she didn't receive an answer. What's happening? A nervous Naruto asked, to which Posdia gently squeezed his hand. It's nothing, just a little hiccup, Posdia replied softly, and Naruto nodded in response. What do we do now? Father is furious, and the others were outside of Olympus, so they can't help us, Hermes said nervously. I'll take care of this, Posdia said as she stood up and summoned her trident. I'll go with you, Ria said seriously, and Posdia nodded, though she wasn't entirely sure about having her mother accompany her to face Zeus. She didn't need help, as her power far surpassed Zeus's. Hermes, go and rest, we'll handle this, Ria said softly, looking at her favorite grandson. Are you sure? I don't want to just sit around doing nothing, Hermes replied, even though he had been struck by his father's lightning attack and didn't want to be idle. It's not necessary, you've done your part. Now it's our turn, Posdia said with a smile to Hermes, who was left speechless. Hermes could say that was the first time he had seen his aunt smile at him. Okay. Was the last thing Hermes said before he rushed to his quarters, leaving a silver trail behind him. Are you ready? Posdia asked Ria, who nodded. I'm always ready, the Titanide replied. Before they left, Posdia turned to Naruto and gave him a kiss on the lips. I'll be back in a moment. I'm going to do something I should have done a long time ago, Posdia told Naruto gently, who simply smiled. At that moment, both mother and daughter turned to go to where Zeus was. / Daniel, tough times are coming, folks. / Location, Olympus Council Meeting Room. The only thing visible in the Olympus Council meeting room was complete chaos. Many of the columns in the room were destroyed, as were the thrones of the gods, along with much of the floor and the walls. All of this was the work of Zeus, who had a furious expression on his face. He had managed to escape from the underworld with the help of the guards, promising them the return of his family to life, something he had no intention of doing. None of those wretched beings deserved the favor of a god like him. Where is he? Zeus yelled, his expression hardened, while discharging multiple lightning bolts from his body. Where is that son of a bee who takes from me what rightfully belongs to me? He shouted again, releasing more divine power. Are you looking for me? Posdia asked as she entered the room. Zeus, upon seeing her, put on an obscene smile and stood in the center of the room. So, you finally realize that you're mine? Very well, you took too long. Now all you have to do is. I don't belong to you, Zeus, and I never will, Posdia interrupted, infuriating Zeus. How dare you say that? Can't you see I'm better than that worthless one? Zeus shouted in anger, his eyes filled with rage and madness. Zeus, please calm down. There's no reason to act this way, Ria said, trying to soothe her son, but her words fell on deaf ears. Posdia struggled to restrain herself from impaling Zeus with her trident. She had to do her best to remain calm. Zeus, I'll give you one last chance to end this without a fight, Posdia said coldly, though her expression revealed that she wanted to kill Zeus in the worst way possible. That son of a bee is nothing but a thief. When she told me about him, I sent Ares to destroy him, but it seems I should have done it myself. Zeus shouted, even crazier than before. She? Ria and Posdia thought with confusion, although Posdia was already thinking about who could have told Zeus about Naruto. If I can't have him, then no one will. At that moment, Zeus lunged at Posdia to attack her. Idiot, Posdia thought, preparing her trident to easily block the attack. Before Zeus could touch Posdia, a water tentacle tightly wrapped around Zeus's limbs, preventing him from moving. What are you doing? Release me at once, it's an order. Zeus exclaimed, only to find that he was being ignored by Posdia. Are you even listening to me? Posdia simply looked back at her mother. It's not mine, Posdia said, pointing to the tentacle. No, it's mine, moving his arm. Naruto made one of the tentacles double over Zeus's arm until it broke, causing the god to scream in pain. Posdia looked at Naruto with surprise and was about to go to him, but Ria put a hand on her shoulder to stop her. Let him be, Ria said seriously. What? But he. Posdia tried to say, but her mother shook her head again. He'll be fine, and Zeus needs to learn that for every action, There's a reaction, Ria told her, maintaining her serious expression. Poseidon seemed to hesitate for a few minutes but had no choice but to obey her mother. She clenched her fists tightly and focused on Naruto. Take care, Poseidon thought. Naruto was, for the first time, angry. He had had a strange premonition, so he had followed Poseidon to this place and had been fortunate enough to overhear everything Zeus had said. He wanted to kill him. We've been loyal to the gods from the beginning. We have served them, praised them, defended them. And how do they repay us? By sending destruction to the only thing that kept us alive. Naruto shouted, delivering a powerful kick to Zeus, sending him crashing into one of the marble columns in the room. You are nothing. Insects that I can replace whenever I want, Zeus replied, ichor running down his forehead and from the corner of his mouth. Zeus's words only enraged Naruto even more. At that moment, several water chains emerged from Naruto's back and went straight for Zeus, who tried to escape but in vain, as the chains pierced his limbs, causing the god of thunder to scream in pain. Who told you about the sanctuary? If you don't want to talk, I can force you to, Naruto said, tightening the chains around Zeus's neck. Rot in. Zeus mumbled with an angry look. Naruto simply gave him an emotionless stare, but before he could do anything, he was interrupted by a scream. It was me. Naruto turned to see Athena, who had tears running down her cheeks. Naruto made the chains strike Zeus hard against the floor, rendering the god unconscious.